Hey guys, what's up? So in our last video, in part 1, we covered our basic maintenance that you should be doing every year to your Onan gas generator. Today we're going to cover part 2 of this 3-part series by going into more detail, an in-depth look at more parts and areas that you need to know about, their maintenance schedules, and some troubleshooting tips. Details coming up on RV Street. Okay, let's get right to it. Let's start taking a look at the spark plugs. Now, a quick little tip here. When we bought this coach, we had no idea of what the previous owner had done throughout the coach or the generator or anything as far as maintenance is concerned. So when you buy a used coach, you want to go ahead and go completely through the entire thing. And since I didn't know what had been done previously on the generator, I went ahead and performed a 500-hour service maintenance schedule. And that includes changing the spark plugs. So I'm not going to change those today, but I'm going to show you how to do it. Here's the tools that you're going to need to change your spark plugs. This is them right here. You have your typical spark plug deep well socket. You have a small swivel. You have an extension, and you have a ratchet. Some of you may even need an additional small extension. You have 2 spark plugs in these generators. One is located right back here. You see, I took a picture of this earlier. See that spark plug wire? You can actually reach back here and you can just feel it. And it's very easy to remove. The other spark plug is right over here on the other side, right behind the valve cover. You see it right up in here? Right there. It's very easy to reach, and you can just get a hold of it right here. Okay, can you see that? Once you remove the spark plug wire, the spark plug is going to be available right there. In order to get that spark plug off, it's going to be right there. You're going to take a 13/16 deep well socket, and you're going to put a 3/8 swivel on it. Then you're going to put a long extension. You see that? That's about a 10-inch extension. And then you're going to put a ratchet, your 3/8 ratchet on there. Then you're going to put the socket right on the spark plug, and you're going to break it loose. Those of you who are not familiar with a swivel allows you to go around a corner and loosen. You see how that socket is turning on that swivel? So once you get the socket onto the spark plug, you have that swivel there, and that allows you to take this ratchet and break the spark plug loose. Okay? Once it's loose, you remove the socket, take it off of the swivel, put the socket back onto the spark plug, and now you can finish just unscrewing the spark plug by hand. Okay, you see that? And then you just bring the spark plug out. Now this is a standard 13/16 deep well socket. This socket will work for both the right and the left hand spark plugs. They also make a deep well socket that has a rubber boot inside here, so that when you put it on the spark plug, you kind of give it a little push and it snaps on the tip of the spark plug. That way, as you're unscrewing it and then you go to remove the spark plug won't fall out of the socket. They also make a magnetic one, a magnetic deep well socket. So again, they both serve the same purpose. They hang on to the spark plug as you remove it so it doesn't drop down. But I will say, in this application, both of these spark plugs are so easy to get to that there's really no place it's going to drop and get into a place where you couldn't retrieve it, and I never had any problems. So what I do is, as soon as I break this one over here loose and I break this one loose, I either just put my hand back there and unscrew it by hand, but in this case, because it's a little bit tighter, I'll put the socket on there and I'll unscrew it the rest of the way and retrieve it out of the hole. So as a quick review, so on this spark plug right behind here, all you need is a 13/16 socket and a ratchet, both 3/8. Reach around there, you can unscrew it. On this side over here, you need a 13/16 socket, a swivel, an extension, and your ratchet, also 3/8 drive. One last thing about this here, this is the valve covers I mentioned earlier. Right behind here is where you adjust the valves. This is a whole entire different service item, and I can't think right off the top of my head what the hours are that you do this, but when I get ready to adjust my valves, that'll be a whole separate video on that subject. So look forward to that when it's time for me to do that type of service on adjusting the valves. These spark plugs need to be replaced every 500 hours. If you put in new spark plugs, you torque them to 10 pounds, 10 foot-pounds, okay? Now for me, because I've worked on stuff for so long, I know how to tighten up a spark plug. It's not that difficult. You bring it in and just snug. That's usually good enough. But those of you who really want to make sure you're doing it right, you are going to need a small 3/8 drive torque wrench. So when you get that new spark plug in there, you want 10 pounds when you're replacing a new spark plug. Now let's say that you're not replacing them. You suspect maybe you have a bad spark plug, and you just want to come in here and remove one and check it. Take it out and look at it and see if they're good. If one is good, more than likely the other one is good. But if you take it out and check it and you decide they're good and you want to just put it back in, you retorque at 18 foot-pounds, okay? 10 foot-pounds when they're new, 18 pounds when they're used and you're putting them back in. Remember in part 1 where I showed you that little tip of how I put just a little anti-seize on that spark arrestor plug with this here, remember? That's what you can do with these spark plugs too. It makes them really easy, a whole lot easier to remove the next time you have to replace them or you want to check them. So take that anti-seize and just put just a little bit on those threads, then go ahead, put it in, and then tighten them up. The next item schedule, remember when we changed the air filter? Remember that? I'll go ahead and pop this again. We replaced this in part 1. This air filter needs to be changed every 150 hours. You really can't clean these air filters or by washing or blowing them out or anything like that. When it's dirty, you take it out, you throw it away. They normally, if you use it in a general way, you don't use it a lot, you can usually let these go for 2 years or 150 hours. If you use your generator a lot and you're in very dusty conditions, you may have to replace this more often than once a year. Okay, you may have to change it in 75 hours, but it's very easy to check. You just pop the 3 clips, pull it out, look at it. If it's still pretty good, just pop it back in and continue to use it. But the standard replacement on this is 150 hours. Your oil, remember, this is where here's your fill cap, here's your drain valve, and the oil filter's up underneath. That also needs to be changed every 150 hours or once a year. We did all that in part 1. Now the fuel filter and the fuel pump are under the generator. They're right underneath this back corner. You can see the picture right here. You see those two things? There's no maintenance needed on these 2 items, but they should be changed out every 500 hours. Those are also what I consider critical parts, and like I said in part 1, I carry a spare fuel filter and a spare fuel pump. Let's go over here to the electrical area. You can see here we have a 50 amp coach, and therefore we have 2 30 amp breakers. You see these breakers right here? Now let's say that you start up the generator, you're somewhere and you need to turn on the generator because you need power. And you go inside the coach and there's no power. You're like, well, what the heck's going on? I'm running the generator and there's no power. The first place to check is right here. Make sure that these 2 breakers are on, okay? You can turn them off or you can turn them on. So if you're not getting power, this is the first place to check. The next scheduled maintenance item and the time you need to do it is the spark arrestor, which I showed you in part 1. It needs to be cleaned every 50 hours. That's what Onan recommends. But I'll be honest with you, I have found cleaning the spark arrestor every 50 hours is a little unnecessary. Once a year is fine. What I do is when I do my annual maintenance, like I showed you in part 1, that's when I do the spark arresters. But like I said, Onan says 50 hours, I say once a year. Once a year is fine. Another thing that a lot of people are unaware of is that you need to keep your eye on and sometimes clean your slip rings. Your slip rings are way back in here. I will show you a picture of that in a minute. During long periods of storage, or if you don't exercise your generator often, your slip rings can become corroded and oxide buildup, and especially if you're near salt areas a lot, like if you go to the ocean a lot or you're in salted roads or whatever. I mean, salty environments can really play havoc on your slip rings. And like I said, a layer of oxide and brush residue can build up on those rings, and it increases their electrical resistance. And by building up electrical resistance because they're not clean and they're corroded, they can shorten the life of your brushes and your regulator. So let me show you what this looks like. The slip rings are located in the stator housing right around the rotor shaft. You see this area? Here's our breakers right here, and if you look back here, you'll see this housing right here. This is the stator housing. The way you check to see if your slip rings are in good condition is you need these two things. A 2-inch mirror. It's a telescopic mirror, okay? And I use my headlight. You can use a flashlight, whatever's good for you. But what you do is you put your mirror inside. Do you see that? Can you see how I put that mirror inside like that? Can you see that? And what I'm doing, here's my mirror, I'm looking inside those vents right there. You see those vents? I take my headlight and I shine it on my mirror, and I'm looking at those top 2 vents right there, okay? Let me show you again with like my screwdriver. I'm looking at these top 2 vent areas. This top one here and this second one here. And when you use your mirror and your light and you're looking through those vent slots, you will see the slip rings right around the rotor shaft. You can see them in this picture right here. Now these are my slip rings in this picture, and you can see that they are clean and shiny. They do not need to be cleaned, but I use and exercise my generator often. If yours has oxide buildup, they'll be black or dirty and they won't be shiny. But you can clean the slip rings with a product called Slick Stick. I'll put a link below in the description text where you can get the Slick Stick. But basically what it is it's a long stick with a handle, and on the end of it, it has a fine and a coarse object, kind of like sandpaper. And what you do is you insert it through those vent holes, and you're running the generator, and it will, those slip rings will run across there, and you can actually just sit there and clean the slip rings. In addition to a link to where you can get the Slick Stick, I'm also going to give you a link to a YouTube video that will clearly show how to use this. I mean, this will all bring it together for you. You'll see how easy it is. The only piece of advice I would give you is, like in my case, this is a very enclosed casing here where our generator is, and that slip stick is about that long. So what you do is you can just cut off some of the handle so you can get the room in there, and when the generator is running, you can just sit there and grind and clean those slip rings through those 2 upper vent holes. So be sure to check out those 2 links, where you can get it and how to use it. There's no way I could really show you here in this tight area with Joni sitting here in front of me videotaping. It would be a very hard thing to do. But like I said, ours doesn't need it anyway because I exercise it often. Remember in the very beginning of part 1 where we were starting or trying to start the generator, and we were cranking and cranking, and then it finally got the error blinking lights? I did a separate little segment to explain more about that, so take a look at that. When you try to start the generator multiple times and it doesn't start, it's going to throw an error code right here. Each different kind of error will display a certain sequence of blinking lights. Do you see that pattern of these blinking lights? You see that? That particular pattern, your manual will define what each sequence of blinking lights means. In this case, continuing to start over and over and over again and it not starting, this is what that particular error code looks like. It's called an overcranking error. So as you can see, the light is still blinking and I can still try to start it. Let me show you. But you see what it does? It tries to start and then it immediately shuts down. And the reason is it has this error code. When these error lights come on like that, and now you're no longer to start it again because it's throwing that error code, what you do is you let the generator just rest for about 5 minutes. And what that'll do is it'll reset the system and you'll be able to start it again. So as you can see, the blinking lights have stopped. I hold this for a couple of seconds to prime it, and now we'll start it. In the back of your operator's manual for your generator, you're going to go to the back and see the troubleshooting section, and it's going to show you what all the different error codes and the different blinking light sequences mean. If you run into an issue, look at the blinking light pattern, go to the back of the manual, and it's going to tell you exactly what's going on, and it'll point you in the right direction on where to look for the problem. Another common problem that people run into from time to time is the oil pressure switch right here. It screws right into this housing. And remember how we removed this here and we cleaned that contact and this contact protected them and put that back on there? So let me give you a couple of scenarios on what could happen here. Let's just say, like in the beginning, you're trying to start it and then it finally starts and it runs for 10 or 15 seconds and then dies. And you're like, well, what the hell? The blinking lights are on. You have to wait 5 minutes for the system to reset. Then now you can try to start it again. Or here's another scenario. You're running your generator. You've been running it for several hours and all of a sudden it just dies. And you're like, okay, so what's wrong with this? What's going on? Well, it could be several things. It may be giving you an error here or it may not. But these oil pressure switches right here is a common thing to fail. So if your generator has been running for a long period of time and quits, or it starts and runs for 10, 15, 20 seconds and quits, check the obvious things first. Things like, do you have a broken fuel line? Unscrew your cap here, check your oil level. Do you have at least a quarter tank of gas in your main gas tank? And so on and so on. Check the obvious things first. But if you have a blinking code going on here, if there's flashing lights and you're wondering what that means and you go to your manual and that particular pattern of those lights says oil pressure, or it may not have blinking lights and you suspect the switch. If you want to make sure that this oil pressure switch has not failed, this may or may not be the problem, but here's how you check it. You just simply unplug the wire off the end of the oil pressure switch. Now you go ahead and restart the generator. If the generator continues to run and it doesn't die after 10 or 15, 20 seconds or whatever it was, if the problem disappears, guess what? That confirms and verifies that the oil pressure switch is bad. And that's another reason why you should be carrying one of those also in your critical spare parts in the coach at all times. These things can and do go bad. So that's how you troubleshoot and verify whether this pressure switch is good or bad. Now you heard me mention make sure that you've checked the obvious things, right? And one of those things was make sure you have a quarter tank full of gas, because your generator runs off of your main gas tank. And there's other fuel related items here, but I'm going to cover that in part 3. So stay tuned for that. As I said in part 1, and I say over and over again, if you don't have your user manuals for your whole entire RV and your generator, you need to get those now. You don't want to wait until you run into a problem and start fumbling around or getting on the internet and trying to find it, because you may find it very difficult to find, or they're not available anymore. So get them now, download them, and have them on hand so you'll have them when you need them. And of course, when you do get them, read them so you can find the particular specs on your generator. It may vary just a little bit from this one, but they're all pretty much the same. As a quick reminder, remember also the critical spare parts for your generator. I highly, highly recommend this. I've mentioned this before in other videos. If you want a complete list of the critical spare parts for the generator that you need for these things, I mentioned all that in part 1, and I'm also putting them in the description text in part 1, so you can get all that information there. And also, don't forget part 3. Part 3 is coming out very soon. If you don't watch part 3, you're going to miss out on more very important information on how to keep these babies running good and top notch. So that way, when you need the power, when you need these things to run, they're going to deliver the power. Now, I know that many of you are going to have a little bit different varied model or wattage output and all that, and that's fine. But everything that I've shown you here in this 3-part series are very common things that RV gas generators experience, and how they're built and how they need to be cleaned and how they need to do maintenance. It's very important to do these things on a regular basis. Now, to some of you that are a much better mechanic than I am, and you've learned some special tips or little tricks that you've learned along the way that makes doing your maintenance easier on these generators, I would love to hear your comments so you can share this information with others that are watching this channel. But what I would like you to do is I want you to tell us what kind of generator you have, and then tell us, what you've learned or the little trick that you've learned along the way that makes it easier for you to do. If we have just a little piece of information and we don't even know what kind of generator you're talking about, not very helpful. Oh, and don't forget, I have got a ton of other maintenance and upgrade videos right up here. Just go to this playlist, and there's just a ton of them there. Click the view playlist when you get to that page, and just see if there are some other things there that might help you along the way. I mean, there is no reason any of us need to go to the school of hard knocks. So take a look at those videos. Also, one thing, Joni and I want to really thank you for using our Amazon store for everything that you need. I mean, everything that we've discussed in this series is going to be in our Amazon store. But even if you have different parts or different part numbers or a different version of a generator, you can still go to the description text, click our Amazon store link, search for your particular parts, put them in the cart, and check out. And not only just your generator parts, but anything else. It really helps us. And it's a great way to say thank you, Martin. Thank you, Joni, for taking the time to make these videos. Don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, if you like this kind of stuff, you like working on stuff and learning how to fix stuff and all that kind of stuff, upgrade things. If you like this kind of stuff, don't forget to subscribe. All you got to do is hit the red button, ring the bell off to the right, so you'll be notified the next time we upload our next video. And our channel, subscribing to our channel, is free. Can you believe that? We do all this for free. So click ring, just like that. So this is the conclusion of part 2 of a more in-depth look of all the different parts and areas that you need to know about, their maintenance schedule, and some troubleshooting tips. So until next time, this is RV Street. Stick around.